She was just like she is 25 years ago or whenever that was. So 30, 40 years ago. That was a long time ago. So you remember we got 3 teachers, and you're going to hear from 2 again tonight. You got Dave Penny sitting over here. Say hi, Dave. Okay, and back over there is Dr. Ward Brown. He's a veterinarian. Okay, and Dan is going to start us off this evening. Now, Dan, are you ready to roll? We're going to do a little background here.
I am ready to roll. I know everybody here wants to see this one.
Yeah,
At least I would if I...
They do, but we want to give them a little background.
All right, that's fine. Go ahead.
So tell me a little bit about
let me sit with you here.
What you've been doing with kids in your life.
Well, we have one. That's a start. I was one. That's another good thing. I've been, and I know you've done some of this work too, but I've been involved with youth, either ministry or sports, really for probably 30 years. So, baseball coach, high school baseball coach, Sunday school teacher for middle school and high school boys.
Whoa. Did you hear that? Sunday school teacher for middle and high school boys. That would be that's one to draw to.
We have about, at our church, I go to Lenexa, and we have about 22 freshman boys. And they're great. I mean, they're really great kids. I was a Bible study. Does anybody know what Bible Study Fellowship International is, BSF?
Yeah, we got some guys. BSFers there.
Yeah, it's kind of a non-denominational Bible study. They do 1,000 classes the same day, all around the world at the same time. And they have a kids program, school program, and they have an adult. And I was a school leader for the rotation, which at that time was seven years. So I did that too. So, I don't know if it's a compliment or a put down. If you really like the way I teach, I pretty much have learned to teach kids in middle school to high school for a couple of decades straight. So I think that's a formative age, especially for boys. And it's just really a great ministry. I'm just really blessed that God let me do it for so long. Right. And so I love that.
So recently, you've been asked to help out a homeschooling network.
Yes.
Talk to us about that just a little bit.
Hopefully, he's gone with me once to, it's kind of like a university model thing that they're doing for homeschool, and it's really exploded since COVID. But Legacy Academy there in Lenexa is one. And they have like 300 kids now there. School age to high school. And so we've done the opening for them where we taught them about creation and stuff like that for about 40 minutes or something. I'll be going back the next time in February 5th, I believe it is, and doing the presentation you're going to see tonight for that group of kids. And they also have a Institute for Creation Research class that they're doing, which is the Unlocking the Mysteries of Genesis series. And they show a video for about half an hour. And then they have a free-for-all of questions. And so the teachers were getting ate alive, and they said, help, can somebody come answer questions? And so we ended up, we're doing that now too. So I think that's every other week that we do that with them. So you never know what you're gonna get in a high school setting. This is high school.
And the teachers weren't having so much trouble with maybe the Bible part of it. But the science part of it is where they were struggling. Yeah. And that's what we find as we go around. Most pastors are not science or math or engineer type people. Not all, but most aren't. Right. And so that's why a lot of times they avoid the early parts of Genesis to some degree, because they can't. Yeah. They got some of you sitting out there, and you're going to corner them nicely, and they're not going to be able to answer your questions from a scientific or a mathematical perspective. So it kind of gets left alone a little bit. The Bible is sufficient, but we're just trying to add to that. So you've been doing this presentation?
I have done this one now several times.
And tell me what are the kids, why this with those kids? What have you found?
Well, a lot of the subjects that we are showing you, and why we were talking about Nephilim the other night and asked you guys if you wanted something on that, is that we get feedback. So if you've been out there eating and I were near you, I probably asked you what you really liked or what was an encouragement to you or whatever. We're constantly just trying to figure out what, the church needs. And these kids said, I don't really know how to defend the Bible's authenticity, and it really has shaken my faith when I'm challenged, because I believe it's true, but I need some encouragement in that area. And so from that, this presentation right here that we're going to do tonight, this was developed from that feedback over a year ago, really. And it really came from Fort Hays State and the Christian Challenge group out there when we went to speak at the college.
That was a college group last year about this time.
Yeah, and they were like, well, dude, I gotta know why the Bible's true. And there was
because I think they're saying
radiometric dating, which you saw last week. That all came from these college sessions that we've been doing around, Wichita State or Emporia State or whatever.
At the college level, even, and high school level, like you said, they're getting beat up just on, it's just start right out. I don't believe the Bible. Why do you believe the Bible? Well, my pastor says it's true. Oh, okay. So what? My mom and dad say it's true. Grandpa and grandma say it's true. So, but I need more than that.
Right.
And so that's why we came up with this. Dan did most of the work on this.
Well, the evolution presentation was like that initially. We weren't really allowed to use Bible verses to prove to them that it was wrong, because you're talking to people that they don't believe the Bible's true. So you've got to prove to them that theory is not even really a good theory. No. And so, by the way, I added all the Neanderthal stuff. I just showed it to some of these guys while we were on break.
What do you mean?
Oh, yeah, we've got Neanderthal DNA still in the human population. It's just spread out all over the world. There's humans, but man,
you showed me that picture.
There's a guy.
Can you show them the picture some way?
We could do that.
Maybe after the break.
Okay, maybe at break we'll talk about
guys in
Neanderthals. Yeah, he's a boxer in Russia.
He's in the parliament or something.
Yeah,
over in England.
He's like 40. He has 40 or 50% DNA is Neanderthal human stuff. He's just a human, just like the rest of us. He lived in a cave to survive the Ice Age, those people, but,
Well, you ready to roll?
Sure, let's go.
Well, we'll have some questions at the end and some comments, I hope. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and Dave will talk about some of that. I like
Big Bang,
theoretical.
climate change.
But I learned last week that theoretical probably isn't the right term, because we can't even get that far in the scientific method.
It doesn't get out of hypothesis
would you just call it fake news? Okay.
Yeah.
Fake theories. Okay. All
I
right.
have no idea what people's political affiliations are, but it's fun to see the positive changes, and it feels like we all feel like, okay, we get to reset all this stuff and start again, and I'm pretty excited for our country, regardless of what
I have one more comment
feel.
then. Whoops.
Yes.
I have a comment.
Okay.
So Diana and I over there,
Yes.
wave Diana, my wife of 55 years. We went to a prophecy conference, maybe one of you or two were there, in Branson at the 1st of December, and there were 1,250 people there, and 21 or 2 teachers there. And for 3 days we listened to, I don't remember, 25 or 30 presentations. Well, there was a theme, there are several themes in the conference. One of the themes was, you folks sitting out there, they said, God has given us a reprieve with the election of Donald Trump. And then they went on to say, don't handle this reprieve like you did the last time he became president. You began to sit on your laurels and think, well, this is going to change everything. And they said, but I want you to know something. The evil one, the devil, he's not letting up one bit. And in fact, he's probably attacking even harder. And we need to stand up as believers against that evil. It's way above Trump and the government, etc. Way above that, where the battle is taking place. So don't rest on your laurels thinking, oh, it's going to be smooth sailing here for the next 4 years. I hope it is, and I hope things are better for our pocketbooks and everything, but don't let your guard down. Stand in there and be ready to fight.
Yeah.
And they talked about fight on a lot of the cultural issues. Don't think that that's just going to go away, because it's probably not. Anyway, sorry. Are we supposed to preach tonight? I don't know.
I don't know.
Sorry, Dave, I got in your way of preaching.
Next week.
All right, Dan Aldrich. Dan, go get
Okay,
him.
next week he's going to do cultural things
Yeah,
like
you're going to
that.
do cultural stuff.
That's
next
going to
week.
be fun. And
What
yes,
the government should look like, what the church should look
Be
like,
prayerful.
what the family should look like, what the marriage should look like, what kids should be doing. It's going to be a good one next week. Ooh, okay. Can I sit by you? Oh, it's
Are
time-
you
time for me to
excited
sit
to
down?
hear about how awesome the Bible is tonight? I want to ask you a question, and there's probably some young people going, yeah, I don't know. Is the Bible God's Word? Is it supernatural in its origin? Can I prove that to you? Do you have faith that your Bible is true? And the goal of this presentation is, by the end of this, when you see the evidence of predictions, prophecies, science, all these different things that the Bible happens to have covered in spades for us to tell us, to teach us that His Word is what it is, hopefully by the end of this presentation, even if you're like, yeah, I don't know about all this, hopefully you're going to be like, yes. Hopefully it's going to be an encouragement to your faith. And that's why we like to see like the college age and younger folks and stuff come to this if we can. We will look at some cosmology, physics, oceanography, engineering, biology, and genetics as well while we're doing it, because it's in there and it's true and it's pretty crazy. We start with the first verse of the Bible and stating that there was a beginning. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but like all the way really up until the 70s, this was being disputed that there was a beginning. Really. You know, that's we have like the Big Bang Theory. Well, it had to start at a certain point in time and whatnot. There was all this fighting that there was no real beginning. But the Bible states there was. And it was just, yeah, I would say the mid-60s. Bell Lab scientist Arno Penzias, who's a Jewish guy, and Bob Wilson, both of these guys, through their analysis, said, well, there had to be a beginning event because we see this stuff, these radio waves decaying over time, and it all goes back to a point in time when it must have been either perfect or started at some point. And they proposed, no, this thing had a beginning. And this was recorded, this wasn't really decided upon or fought for that it had a beginning until the 1960s, 3,500 years after this. In fact, Penzias then becomes very much more, I don't know if he's a Jewish believer or he's Jewish by faith these days, but he became really more of a religious, a God-believing man. And he says, listen, I can tell you right now from what we see in science, that if you just had nothing but Genesis, or the first 5 books of the Bible, and the Psalms, that you would have no doubt that this is exactly what we should find in science, and we're finding that. So he's one of our first Nobel Prize guys that goes, you know what, I think the Bible's true. It's not a surprise to everybody in this room, but start thinking about this as we go. How about this? Job 38, and by the way, Job is loaded with great stuff. Job 38, can you send forth lightning that they may go and say to you, lightning itself, the light saying, here we are? The implications in the Hebrew is there's some way that these light waves, or radio waves, radio frequencies and light waves, could carry a message. Literally, speech could be carried across these. In fact, the AM, FM, and microwave spectrum down here, the very slow waves in the IR range of light or energy, radio energy, Marconi discovers in the 1890s that, you know what, this really is true. I think we could do that. And I don't know if you know who he is, but it's 3,400 years after this is written that we figure out that you can actually use radio transmission can be accomplished through these low frequency wavelengths. In fact, this is a comment from Marconi, the radio guy. In fact, this is your deep space radio transmission pioneer, was Guillermo Marconi. The more I work with nature, the powers of nature, I can feel God's benevolence. And he lands here that, you know what, I've kind of figured out that this eternal creator, sustainer guy, everything's dependent on him. And he comes to his faith and becomes a strong believer after the fact. Of course, he's our Nobel Prize in physics. He's a radio technology pioneer, most of our deep space transmissions. These are guys that said they learned from the Bible that these things were possible, and they went after it, and they found these things. The earth hangs on nothing. When did we figure that out? You know, the ancient writings in India, when I was over there a few years ago, they believed that the earth was flat and 4 elephants walked around and held it up. About 2500 BC, their oldest Sanskrit writings. What the Greeks, they believed that turtles, a big turtle carried the earth around on its back, and it was flat too, like a disc. But somehow this thing hangs on nothing. Well, in the 1620s, Kepler comes along, you know, our planetary motion first guy, and he says, the earth hangs on nothing. 3,200 years later, from the book of Job, we find this out. He says this, and he would say something like this: science is the process of thinking of God's thoughts after it. Reading his Bible, he comes up with all of this astronomy, and really our modern astronomy is based on, you know, our Kepler theory. Is that crazy? Getting pretty good already, isn't it? Let's go. Let's keep going. This one, a kid at Sunrise Christian Academy in Wichita. I don't know, how many kids did we speak to down there? 500 or 600 of these kids. Well, the kids said, well, my favorite proof that the Bible is true is in Job. Really? What is it? Well, you know, Job 38 again, same chapter, by the way. Have you entered the springs of the sea and walked in the depths of the ocean? There's also the Psalms that talk about mountains and valleys in one of David's Psalms. In the ocean. Well, we didn't even know to the early 70s with the bathyscaphe that at 8,000 to 10,000 feet on the ocean floor, we were finding these what? These ocean vents, these springs of the deep. What, did Job have a submarine 3,500 years ago? No. How did he know there were springs at the bottom of the ocean, that there were valleys, that there were mountains in the ocean? He had no submarine. This is inspired word. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? That's right. God told him, moved him along by the Spirit. All of the word is God breathed, carried along by the Spirit. And this is, God taught him this 3,500 years before. They would have laughed at him. What are you, nuts? There's springs in the deep and mountains and things. Are you crazy? How about this one? I kind of like this. The birds of the sky, the fish of the sea, everything that swims in it, in the ocean's currents. Wait a minute. There's a currents in the ocean? Who's seen Finding Nemo? Come on, or with your grandchildren if you have. Okay, what does the turtle ride down to Australia? He rides a current down deep under the water surface. There are these currents. Well, Matthew Maury is one of our first naval officers. He actually was injured in 1843 and couldn't serve anymore. And he was reading his Bible, Psalm 8, and said, you know, these currents must be real in the oceans. And as part of his service to the country and to the world, really, he began asking sea captains to log their pilot charts with currents that they found in various places in the world. By 1853, they had an international marine conference and verified that there were indeed predictable currents all over our oceans that you could get in and ride and get a lot quicker where you're going from A to Z if you knew where they were. This was 3,200 years before they were found. In fact, he's called the father of oceanography, Matthew Maury, and his currents and his wind currents, both bird and fish, by the way, are still used today. That's how we get quickly from one place to another, by riding a current. It expedites the process. Or wind as well follows these basically currents and things from the topography of the earth. And he just believed his Bible and went looking for it. And he found exactly what the Bible said was there. Again, about 3,000 years later, roughly. I love that he said, when they said, well, you can't use the Bible to find these currents with. And he said, hey, listen, beg your pardon. It's an authority on anything it's talking about, so pay attention. And sure enough, we found all of these things. Impressed yet? Oh, we're just getting started, man. Come on, this is going to be good. What about, we talk about this with the ark, and this, this 300 by 50 by 30, or if you drop the zeros, if you're a math person, you're thinking 30 by 5 by 3 ratio. That's the perfect ratio you need for the perfect transoceanic sea holes. In fact, in 1993, South Koreans did tests of the 12 best ship holes for deep sea traffic and transport. All modern designs were tested. Guess what they found? Gee, the best for comfort, balance, strength, and stability is Noah's Ark's design. In fact, that's what most barges are designed for today. HMS Dreadnought battleships, the British, whole class of battleships, follow this same design pattern. The only difference is they were made to move, so they have a little bit of different shape, but the ratios are almost identical, and they have found these to be the best and most stable platforms for a ship to transport across the ocean. Surprised? How did Noah know that? Are you kidding me? 3,500 years before that. Okay, we all know about Leviticus, the parts of the Bible we just kind of skip over it. Okay, it's okay if you do. But listen, there's a lot of cool stuff in there, especially immunology. Like, if somebody, it makes sense to us today. We think they had to be crazy. What were they thinking? But, if somebody's unclean, they have a disease, a skin rash, leprosy, put them out of the camp until that's gone and cleanse them every day until that's healed. But we didn't really even practice that. In fact, it wasn't really until late 1700s that we started practicing that. There were, I forget the gentleman's name, the German that said, you know what, we need to wash our hands before we deliver these babies because all the moms and the babies are dying. And gosh, if they'd have just read their Bible, they probably could have saved a lot of heartache. And by the way, circumcision on the 8th day, that's the peak not only of antibodies in the boys for them to do that, it's also the blood clotting agent. It rises on the 8th day. If they had done it on the 7th day, these boys would have died, bled to death. If they had done it later, they wouldn't have hit the peak vitamin K and all these other things. Wouldn't have been optimal. But the 8th day is the perfect time to do that. How did they know that? From the Word. It's crazy. 3,100 years before, if we'd have just read our Bible. In fact, Louis Pasteur, he is the father of microbiology. And, pasteurized milk and whatnot. A little science, it'll take you away from God, but a lot of it will take you right to it. It's like when I was an evolutionist, when I was in school, and I was a science kid, I just get enough science to go, yep, it's got to be true. I went from goo to zoo to you, that worked out. If you keep going and you look at the genetics and whatnot, as those studies come along, you go, oh, this can't be. It's not true. He's the same way. He said, if you haven't found him yet, keep looking. He's there. Is it Max Born, one of those guys, physics guys from the 20s, said, oh, you drink from this glass of knowledge, and you be an atheist about halfway through. but keep going. At the bottom of the glass, God's waiting for you. That was his comment. These are all Nobel Prize-winning, father of oceanography, microbiology, deep space transmission, Kepler, these bunch of rubes. They don't know what they're talking about, right? They all found what they were looking for by looking at the Bible. Acts 17:26. So here, from one blood, from one man, every nation was made, right? To dwell on the face of the earth, predetermined appointed times, the boundaries and the dwellings in which you live. Of course, my favorite verse is verse 27, that you might reach for him, though he's never far from any of us. That's why you have the cantankerous neighbor. So you'll go, oh, Lord, I don't want to deal with this guy. But here's God right there. But the key to this verse is from one man, one blood, everything. We all came from this same family, from Adam and Eve, from the same pair. Well, just so happens, we talked a little bit about this last week, 2003 Genome Project, mitochondrial Adam and Eve, or Y chromosome Adam and mitochondrial Eve. We have this genetic proof that we go back to this common pair based on mutation rates in the human genome. You never were a monkey. You can take your sequenced DNA and see the common mutation rates all the way back to a common pair roughly 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. That's science. We see a bottleneck at about 4,700 years ago. A bottleneck where we got to 3 markers in the mitochondria. What happened about 4,700 years ago where there was a bottleneck in human history? We almost became extinct, but there were 3 branches of the mitochondrial DNA that we can find today in the human population. What happened? The flood. And who was on the ark? Him, his wife, his 3 sons, and his daughter-in-laws. It doesn't look like Mrs. Noah had any daughters. She didn't. She had 3 boys. But genetically, you wouldn't expect that to be true if you were secular humans, like I was. But it is true. So Acts is about 2,100 years ago. So, it was right in that there was one blood. But, we know from Genesis 1 and Adam and Eve that 3,500 years ago, exactly what they were looking for when this was recorded is exactly what we see. And what the Bible said was true in genetics is absolutely true in science. In fact, Francis Collins, your Human Genome Project scientist, along with John Sanford, who's got some great interviews and things you can watch online, both become Christians through the Human Genome Project. Gee, isn't that kind of odd? Yeah, because he comes out saying, you know what, the God of the Bible's the same one in the genome. You can worship him in the laboratory if you're studying genetics or in the Bible. They mesh together. It's exactly what we expected. It isn't millions and billions of years. It's this short period of thousands of years to a common pair, genetically. That's what the Bible said. So let's talk about these prophecies, predictions, and probability. I don't know if you've ever seen this book. I've never had one in my hands, but I have the online copy, and I've read it and used it for reference for a number of years. But J. Barton Payne's Encyclopedia Bible Prophecy. This is the authoritative guy who actually spent a lot of his life studying this and documenting every single prophecy in the Bible and what happened next and all of this. And so, this is kind of some maybe interesting information for you, but 1,239 prophecies in the Old Testament, 578 in the New, 1,817 total prophecies. 1,300 of these have now been fulfilled, with 500 remaining. But wait, there's more. There's also 700 verses that accurately predict scientific truths that were not understood at the time of their writing until thousands of years later, like you've seen a few examples of. There's another 700 of those. And not one of them's been wrong. I'm going to throw that up there for you guys with a smartphone and know what this is, but this little code, you can scan that if you'd like and go to the link where you can actually view this information here, so I'll leave that up there for a minute. If you've got a smartphone, you want to take a picture of it and go there, you can. Or you can go to our website. On our articles page, you'll find links to these two. So roughly, if you add the predictives plus the prophetic, you get about 2,500 total. 2,000 have already been verified or fulfilled, and so far we don't have any errors in these. None. Everything that it said was going to happen, happened, or is yet to happen, sitting at this 500 number. That's what we're looking at. Another barcode for those, or a QR code. If somebody's interested, there it is. Yes, ma'am. I love the conversation nature of this. Go ahead. Yes.
About 2,000 of these already have been fulfilled with 0 errors.
That's right.
As of today, we are having prophecy being fulfilled as well.
Yeah.
Can we add that to our 2,000?
Yeah, of course you could. That's why it says about, because I'm that guy too. It's pretty crazy. Something can happen today in the Middle East, or something could fulfill yet another one. But that's biblically, in the canonized Bible, we are at that number fulfilled. And that includes our prophecies and predictions. But I want you to know something. A few years ago, Dave and I were a part of a program called I Share Hope. And Dave did a wonderful job on the first and second laws of science and the creation and the fall. And I got to do evolution, and it was part of an online event. And there was Lee Strobel, and there was a guy named Warren something, I forget his last name, but he was the guy that was the Cold Case for Christ guy. And he was all probabilities. And I learned so much from that information that he presented. It was really interesting. But I learned this part from him. So he was a forensic scientist, and he testifies in court on DNA and probabilities that this guy is the guy that was on, in the location that killed the person with the DNA and all this other stuff. And he has to tie all this together for court cases. And he told us that in a court of law, your testimony, it's typically 10 to the 15th power. In other words, 10, 15 zeros with proper commas every third one, 10 with 15 zeros behind it to 1 is considered legally binding and as a testimony to say this is in all probability the person that did it, and it will stand in court of law, and many cases have been decided at that level. If you are a secular scientist, like I was, or a science person that was secular, was a non-believer, you would use this number. Well, I'll say statistical impossibility is 10 followed by 50 zeros to 1. That's you winning the lottery, the same ticket 10 times in a row, those kinds of things. It's basically impossible. So this is what they would consider as an absolute benchmark, is at 10 to the 50th. So you've got two methods to say this is true or it's not based on the laws of probability. So probability, in conservative terms, if you just said each one of those prophecies or predictions was just a 1 in 10 shot, and I'm going to show you some that are just way more than that, but if you did really super conservative 1 in 10, well, you're going to get to a very big number if this thing is correct. So I don't know if you know who Cyrus is, but Daniel goes and shows Cyrus when he comes as part of the Persian Mede invasion in the book of Daniel. He goes and shows Cyrus his name in Jeremiah's writings and says, you were predicted to be here to conquer these guys a couple hundred years ago. And it blows Cyrus away, and so he becomes pretty much a believer in at least what Daniel's telling him, and is very supportive of them starting to go back home after that. Well, there happens to be in archaeology a find here, what's called the Cyrus cylinder. You should look it up and check it out if you'd like. But this cylinder, written in cuneiform, tells you all about Cyrus and his conquering, and basically exactly what you read in Isaiah 44:28, 45:1, and 45:13, and actually it's Isaiah where he's found these references to him, and he brings it to him, and he says, man, you must have some kind of special God if he can predict I'm going to roll up 200 years later and take this place over. And it blows him away. Well, this cylinder's for real, and he talks about this in his cylinder. This is outside the Bible. Well, we know that this is, since it's 150 years before, this is about a 10 to the 15th power. This is like what would typically stand in a court of law. That's probably impossible to have happen without some kind of foreknowledge or supernatural event. Because that would probably say, well, here's one that kind of goes the other way. It goes even farther. So if you get into Daniel 7 and chapter 2 as well, and 8, he makes these predictions of the statue, right? And all 4 of these kingdoms being fulfilled, being documented hundreds of years before they take place by Daniel, is a 1 in 10 to the 59th power. Not only is he in Babylon and doing this, but we have Cyrus the Great, which we just talked about. But he goes farther. He talks about Alexander the Great and the way he would attack and strafe and his tactics. And then he talks about the Roman Empire, which comes along hundreds of years later. He's back in here predicting all of these things. The last he predicts is the coming Messiah, which is fabulous stuff in Daniel chapter 7. And he also talks about this Antichrist that will one day come. But him getting these right is a 1 in 10 to the 59th power. That's impossible. But he did it. And it's in your Bible. Well, the odds of biblical references that we're talking about, prophecies, predictions, and all this, without error, by chance, if we use laws of science, scientific laws of probability, is less than 1 chance in 10 to the 2000th power. If it's only 1 in 10 for each one of these prophecies, some of them are way more than that. But we're just going to be very consistent, very conservative, say just 1 in 10, that's all we need. And we have 2,000 of these we can prove have happened, that were predicted in science or in prophecy, in historical events. Well, that means it would be by chance that this happening would be 1 in less than 10 to this. That's 40 times what I need to convict you in court. That's rather 130 times what I need to convict you in court with testimony. 40 times what science would tell you is statistically impossible. It's 40 times beyond that number. That many zeros behind a 10 to 1 that your Bible is accurate in all that it proclaimed. And all of these events are verifiable that we have done that. If you buy into, and Dave and I would both say that there's probably more atoms in the universe now thanks to the Webb telescope than what they thought at the time. But if you buy into what we know of the universe and the atoms in the universe, I'm not talking molecules, I'm talking about the atoms inside those, the little guys, there would be 10 to the 87th power of atoms in the universe. So we're gonna blindfold Steve, and we're going to send him out into the universe, and we're going to have him see if he can find that 1 atom in the entire universe. The odds of him doing that would be 1 in 10 to the 87th power. That means he's 23 more times likely to do that than these predictions being accurate in the Bible. That's the numbers we're talking about. If you don't believe your Bible, check your mind. Look at the math. Just if you're a statistical person, a numbers person, a science person, think about how ludicrous it is to think that this is not a supernatural book. What about Jesus? Well, we just kind of left him out of the equation till now, but this is the most important thing. What are you going to do with him? He fulfilled 351 of these. On our articles page on our website, You can read these 351 prophecies and the odds of this, but there were two secular scientists started off that way. Stoner is one, the other guy from University of California. These guys back in the 40s and 50s, they said, you know what, we'll study this probabilities that Jesus is who he said he was, you know, from history and things that we can prove. But as soon as we get to impossibility, we're going to stop. So we get to 10 to the 50th power or thereabouts, we'll just stop. But we know there's these 300 plus Old Testament prophecies. So let's look and see if he fulfilled them. By the way, there's 300 of your 500 are about him. And he's not come back yet. So thank you for that, Lord, giving us more time. But what is the probability that one person could fulfill 351 verifiable Old Testament prophecies? Put that up there for you if you have a smartphone and you want to do that. There it is. Let's watch this little presentation by this British guy who used to be an atheist but now is a believer and an evangelist. Check this out.
300 that talk about Jesus, and these are truly amazing prophecies. Now, some may ask, Paul, is it possible for anyone to fulfill these prophecies? And I want to say, absolutely not. Because some of them you have no control over. For example, can you control where you're born? Absolutely not. Can you control who gave birth to you? Absolutely not. Can you control even what you did as a child? Absolutely not. And so there are certain prophecies that Jesus had absolutely no control over, yet he fit them perfectly. And I want to share with you 8 of those prophecies and their probability and compare the mathematical probability of what it was to fulfill these 8 prophecies. Let's have a look at them together now. So the first one is, one person in the world born in Bethlehem. That's a 1 in 200,000 probability. Now, I didn't make up these probabilities. These were done by experts. One person rode in Jerusalem, riding a foal of a donkey, claiming to be king of the Jews. 1 in 100. One person paid 30 pieces of silver to turn someone in to the authorities. 1 in 1,000. One person has been wounded in their hands. 1 in 1,000. One person charged and being innocent and not defending himself. 1 in 1,000. One person crucified between 2 thieves and then buried in the tomb of one of the richest men. 1 in 1,000. One person dying from crucifixion. 1 in 10,000. And the money being paid to betray Jesus being returned to the priest and used to buy a potter's field. 1 in 100,000. Now, when you add up these probabilities for just these 8 prophecies, it is an astronomical figure. It is 10 to the power of 17. That means 1 with 17 zeros behind it. This is just a huge number. And that's just for 8 prophecies. For 16 prophecies, it's 10 to the power of 45. For 24 prophecies, it's 10 to the power of 73. And for 48 prophecies, it's 10 to the power of 157. These are huge numbers. Now, when you're dealing with statistics and probabilities, when something is 10 to the power of 50, that means the probability of achieving it is 0. That it is absolutely impossible for this thing to happen when it is 10 to the power of over 50. Let's have a look at some common probabilities. For example, someone being struck by lightning. This has a probability of 1 to 280,000. It's a pretty big number. How about winning the lotto? That's a probability of 1 to 3,700,000. That's a big number. But then when you add the Powerball to that as well, that's 1 to 38 million. So let's put a graphical representation on the screen. So the probability of filling 8 prophecies, it's that number right here. But then 48 prophecies, look at how huge this number is. We can't even comprehend these numbers. In other words, it is statistically impossible for one person to fulfill just 48 of these prophecies. But yet Jesus didn't fulfill 48 of these prophecies. He fulfilled all 300 of them. Jesus is truly divine. It was part of God's plan for these 300 prophecies to be in the Bible to show who exactly Jesus is, that he is the Messiah, he is the Savior of the world, he is the one that we are looking forward to. And I just want to encourage you to ask the question, who is Jesus to you? He's not just an ordinary man. He's someone amazing. And I want to encourage you to get to know him personally.
I say amen to that. Just the first 48 is 1 in 10 to the 157th power. Those guys that started studying that, they really, the first 8 they looked at, they got to 1 in 10 to the 48th and said, oh my gosh, this guy is who he said he was. One became a Christian, the other one, I'm not sure what happened to him, these 2 scientists that did this work. That paper, Stoner's white paper, and some of his other work is also in our article section. It's now public domain, it's free, so there's a PDF on our website on the articles page under prophecies and probabilities. You can find that there. So let me ask you this, knowing what you know now, do we think it was supernatural? Is Jesus who he said he was? Who do you say he is probably the most important question I got for you. Because it is a C.S. Lewis moment. He's either the savior of the world and fulfilled scientifically, ridiculously, to these numbers that you would have to fight to deny. He fulfilled these prophecies. Or he was a liar or a lunatic. And I don't think the latter of the two are possible because of the supernatural nature of what he did for us. So I want to ask you these questions now that we started with, kind of turned around a little bit. Was God glorified in his word for you tonight? Does that encourage you to read your Bible? Has it been affirmed? Is it true? Did you learn something about how true his word is tonight? How's your faith compared to when you walked in here? Especially in your word. When it says something, do you realize how true it is? And how true it's going to be to you, and how encouraging it should be to you to see these numbers, unless you're fighting against him, and then you're pretty irritated about now. And I'm okay with that too, because he'll work that out with you. I want to thank you. I would like for you guys to, if you want, I'll leave that up while we're on break or whatever we're doing here, and you can scan that, and that should take you to our articles page where you can see a lot of links and documents that you might be interested in if you're a fan of this stuff. What did you think?
How about a round of applause for what you think?
I love John 17:17 is Jesus praying for us, and he says, Father, sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. If you feel like you're not growing in your faith, ask yourself when the last time you read that Bible and studied it with an open mind and heart and what he could do for you. I love what it says in Psalm 1. How blessed is the man? How blessed is the person that does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, doesn't stand in the path of the sinners, doesn't sit with the scoffers, sit in their seat, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He's like a tree firmly planted by streams of water. That person's going to bear fruit in season. Their leaves aren't going to wither. And this is the verse. This is my favorite. And in everything he does, he prospers. Everything, because he is following the law of the Lord. But the wicked, I'll go ahead and finish Psalm 1 since I got to do it since I'm all the way this far. But the wicked aren't so. What happens to them? They're like chaff blown about by the wind. They're blown about by the wind. The wicked will not stand in the judgment. The ungodly will not stand in the congregation of the righteous. They don't get to go there. The Lord knows the way of the righteous people who follow his law, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Talk about the first psalm and then just drop the mic and walk off. That's where it's at. That's how much that Bible means to you. It's your lifeblood spiritually in this world. Questions?
Ward's over there if you got a question. Did you have a comment? What question? You have a comment? Yes. This is the comment.
I think what helped me most tonight is that British guy getting up there and talking about the prophecies that he couldn't control. And I think I'd like to learn more about the ones he couldn't control, because every time I read when he was going into Jerusalem riding the donkey, it's like, oh, crud. I read somewhere that I need a donkey. Go get me a donkey. And so, that's one he could control. But the way he got it was, there's a guy and he'll have a donkey waiting for you. But I really liked the ones that he has no control over. I'm going to look into those.
Yeah, like he was born in Bethlehem. I mean, he's a baby. He can, manipulate that. However, what's even more fascinating to me is one of these guys like Sir Robert Anderson and all of that stuff from Daniel chapter 7 and 9, where the number of days until the coming of the Messiah, from the command to rebuild Jerusalem, in the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, those dates that are given. And then count your weeks given in Daniel, your days, and it comes out to this donkey day. That's pretty crazy. And he get in control when he was going to be born, where he was going to be born. But yeah, also, what's also cool is he said, no, not yet. My time isn't yet. No, we're not going to do that yet. Okay, now it's time to get the donkey. He knew exactly his own prophecies that he was going to fulfill. Check it out sometime. It's fascinating. Sir Robert Anderson, The Coming Prince, written by a Scotland Yard guy in the 1890s. Unbelievable work about the book of Daniel and the coming prince. Other questions? Yes, sir. History guy. Love history. My dad just was not for history. So is my son.
And I said before, I used to teach history.
Let's go.
And of course, most of what I taught was okay to teach in a public school because the Constitution is the law of the land, and most of it's a reference to the Constitution. And, the various people who made impacts along the way, we have all their quotes.
Yeah.
And the kids see all these quotes. But it is amazing how when it gets to this, these people who proved, we don't see their what they actually said in science books, do we?
Yeah, you don't. But every
Satan's in control.
Exactly. Every discipline of science, every champion or pioneer, including the first female member of the American Astronomers Association, Maria Mitchell, said, I can't wait to see what more things we did. And this is back in the 1800s. You won't hear about her, but she's an amazing scientist, a female in America in the late 1800s. And she says, I just can't wait to see what God's going to show us in astronomy over the next 100 years or so, because we're getting all this great equipment, these telescopes and stuff. He's just going to show us even more stuff that's in his word. Maria Mitchell. But you're not going to hear about her. She's the first female American Astronomer Association member. But I've never read that in a science book. I was told that the dinosaurs turned into birds. I didn't know Compsognathus fossils in China are being found with birds in their stomach. Or all the Tyrannosauruses we're finding them buried alongside possums. What? Nobody told us about that. Okay, go ahead. Anything else? What else we got? Did you enjoy it? Okay. If you were encouraged in your faith and you could start taking that Bible a little bit more seriously, that we've reached our goal.
Oh, Maddie's got us.
Come on, Maddie.
Come on, Maddie. Tongi grad last year and a half ago.
Okay. I don't know if you already kind of talked about this. I might have been like writing my notes down when you were talking about this. But so how old do you really feel, or how old do you think the world really is? Like, you think it's like...
Personally, I believe, based on science, and I'm like a radiometric dating guy, a chemistry guy, I think it's between 6,000 and 7,000 years old. I don't think there's any reason to think it's any more than that. I used to be an evolutionary defender, president of the club that fought for evolution. I was an old Earth believer initially, but the more I studied the radiometric dating, and the more I was starting to see these helium halos around crystals in granite, in what I thought was 4 billion years old, and that I knew couldn't be any more than 6,000, 7,000 years old. I mean, there shouldn't be any helium there in the deepest parts of there, but it's there. I mean, things like that just blew me up. Just how erratic and catastrophic our Earth history actually is, with not just the flood, but volcanics and ice age and all these things that happen post-flood. It makes sense to me perfectly. I mean, I don't have any problem with 6,000, 7,000 years old. In fact, the solar system, you know, the rings of Saturn shouldn't be there. You know, there should be a lot more dust on the moon. You know, we thought that we were going to sink into all this dust on the moon because we thought it was, you know, billions of years old. No, there's hardly anything there. The ocean floor, there's almost no meteorites. There's very little sediment compared to what you would expect. If the runoff from the world's rivers and whatnot into the ocean were the way it is now for the last even more than 10,000 years, shoot, the oceans would be filling up with sand. It's just not that old. There are no meteorites down there either. Yes. Is that, I mean, you know, you take it for what it's worth. I mean, but I'd love to talk to anybody that was an old earther, because I had to walk that painful journey. And that's why we do radiometric dating, and just how silly the assumptions are. No observable event in any volcano has ever matched what we would say something's 3 million, 30 million years old, whatever, and it was like 30 years ago, because the argon gas is getting injected into the hot lava, blow up the parent-daughter relationships. All that stuff's hooey. We were using it to prove the Earth was older. We needed time for evolution, but it's just not true, and it's not observable. There's nothing I can hang my hat on that I can say the Earth's that old.
Break. See you back here in about 10 or 12 minutes.
Take a break for 10 minutes.